All right, so I see the red light is on. And that's right, I am in here for a non wrestling related video for this podcast and as well for the audio version. And welcome to another episode of the In the Hot Seat podcast. And in this episode, I've been wanting to do this for quite some time, and I wasn't too sure how I was going to actually do things. There might be a little bit of a random ramblings at this point, and it's still pretty much very going on, and it's almost over, at least the main storyline anyway, and that's about The Walking Dead and something that I've been a huge fan of ever since I ever seen it on TV. Now, I will state I haven't seen the comics beforehand, but I did get to see it more on TV as it happened, mainly so I was able to actually catch up on Netflix before I officially watched it on AMC, and I've been watching it ever since then. And as of right now, it is in the final season, and it's basically almost over for the main part. And what I mean by that, because it is so big, it does have other stuff going on with it. So it's basically a whole universe of it. So you not only have The Walking Dead, you have Fear the Walking Dead, which I might actually talk about in its own separate podcast, and as well The Walking Dead will be on top of that, and there are other stuff that are looking to happen. I've been hearing that might be an actual movie in terms of Rick's side of things, one of the main characters, which I'll get into a little bit more in depth about a little later on. Also, with the other characters, in terms of Negan and Maggie, they're looking to have their own basically spin off after the main Walking Dead series actually ends, and that continues on to their story, and to see how they are able to get along and everything. So, getting right into it, way back into the beginning, so rewinding a little bit, a lot more than a little bit, basically getting into what has been happening since then, and it basically takes place in Atlanta and having to deal with a zombie outbreak and everything. And what I like about it too, it feels like what actually might happen are the closest to it and more relatable in a lot of ways in terms of anything zombie. And I do really appreciate, and I've been enjoying anything basically that's really in relation into zombies and everything, and have been a fan of. So before that, I was able to on the sign up check out things like Resident Evil. I've been a big fan of and everything, but this has been the closest to like more realism in terms of things, especially with characters that you eventually care about and actually don't want to see die and want to actually keep on going and actually keep fighting and actually have more of a purpose and everything. So they did a really good job of that. And one of the main characters being Rick, and actually being seen first, and he was basically in the hospital at that point. Not too sure on exactly being able to see as why, but he was able to wake up and being able to figure out what happened and everything. And when he woke up, things basically went to hell very quickly after that, realizing there was something wrong and wanted to be able to find his family at that point and be with them and to see if they're okay, if everything went well, and if they're still alive at that point. So that was basically his mission, to be able to find them and everything. He eventually does, which is a good thing. And at that point, they were able to not only find each other, but able to actually deal with other people at that point and have people be with them as a part of a group. So in terms of that, where we had the wife being Andrea on that, where we had a good friend of his, Shane Walsh, which really gets a lot messy because at that time, um, the family really thought Rick was dead at that point, especially being in the hospital and all of that. So everything just got messy after that. So Shane and Andrea ended up actually basically being together at that point. So it made it really hard for Rick to really adjust to that and to try and kind of build that trust and everything. But after a while, things get messy. Him and Shane and actually end up fighting and everything, and things end up not going so well. After a while, they ended up having to be basically moving on, especially after a while with Shane dying as well at that point. And then there's many locations too on top of that on where they went and everything. They ended up finding a jail, basically being one of the main homes for a good while and everything. And Andrea actually ended up having a baby at one point too, as well, because not only did they have the baby, but they also had their own son as well with Carl, and ended up having the baby with Judith and everything being born in the hospital as well, with everyone else there. So there's that for their main home and everything. So a lot of people were able to be there on the way with them in terms of Herschel, one of the main people to be with them. Glenn also being there in terms of helping everyone out and making sure things are okay. Definitely one of my favorite characters too as well. Also, we had Maggie, of course, those two, Maggie and Glenn, able to have their relationship grow over time and everything, which is really nice to see. And eventually, at one point, getting so close and dealing like, like with marriage and all that stuff, and eventually having their own kind of way later on afterwards. So that was really cool to see how their relationship was able to grow and everything. At one point, sadly, Andrea ends up dying and everything. She ends up turning after that, after birth, and everything, dealing with the birth of Judith. So it wasn't really exactly easy at that point. And then Rick and Carl had to take care of the baby and be able to have the caretakers of themselves of that. So uh, they didn't go at it alone, which is good. So they had the rest of the group and everyone doing their fair share part and everything. They even had the likes of Carol there, helping them out at one point and being able to be with them since basically the beginning on that, and also on the way where they were able to meet someone else, where they had Daryl and as well his brother too at one point, and those two kind of like get in a way like rebels, basically being more on their own, so they weren't really used to being in groups, but it was an adjustment, especially for Daryl, but his brother, it was more harder to actually be able to deal with the group and everything. So he basically at times, wasn't too sure, especially with meeting with like in terms of like enemies and stuff like that. So made it pretty hard, definitely for his brother for Daryl at that point, just to try and get used to everyone. And then eventually he ends up dying at some point too, way later on. Annette and Daryl actually being more accepting of the group and basically being part of one of the main leaders that actually ends up dealing with a lot of the situations too on the show. So definitely over time, he was able to be one of my favorite characters and still is till this day. After a while, they end up meeting someone else. Michonne actually comes along as well, being a part of the group after being basically on her own for a while, and she went through her fair share of problems and everything. Seeing her with the basically two people that she really cared about, and basically having them as walkers side by side as she's able to fight along her own way until she actually met the group, but it was actually harder to let them go. At that point, after a while, she eventually does and actually becomes a lot more stronger. So another one of my favorites too, as well. Um, then we get into, um, basically everything else in terms of other people that did get to eventually join, where we had Abraham and Eugene and Rosita. They were actually trying to make a difference and actually wanted to actually stop the virus at one point. So it got, that much more personal and everything. They wanted to end things and to be able to see that. And they went so far and being able to try and do that, but they didn't get the chance to. And basically just still joining the group and everything and doing other things besides that, and would have been interesting to see how far they would actually be able to do that, and to see how they would be able to stop the virus and bring things back to normal in that way, but that it obviously didn't get to happen. so they still end up basically still dealing with the group anyway. Um, Other people that eventually also were able to be there over time, because there's just a lot to actually get through in terms of that. Also, in the beginning, Morgan being one of the friends of Rick and being able to help him out, being able to see if Rick can actually find his family and everything. And it was a little bit of a friendship for a little bit, but it ended up getting stronger. And then after a while, he too joins the group basically, and then after that, basically goes out into his own, and that's where we have Fear. And that's how Fear comes along. He has his own group after a while, and then it's just this whole big other world after them. So that's why I'll talk more about more Morgan's side when I get into the Fear of the Walking Dead podcast on that side of things. So Morgan definitely one of my other favorite characters for sure, showing the better side of his side for sure on the Fear side of things. So that was definitely shown, definitely cool on that. So I'll definitely get into that more, especially like I said for the fear side of things. And that other people as well, they had Father Gabriel as well, being religious and everything, being one of the fathers, and being able to have more of an inspiration for everybody, more hope. He eventually joins up as well, and there's other side characters like T Dog being able to be there, a part of when they were in the jail and everything, and helping them out the best that he could until he fortunately then ends up not only dying but actually changing as well. Other people like Therese uh, able to be there and being able to help out too as well. So just a lot of people I could really get into, but I'll be here all day on that. I could talk about them all day if I could. But just to name a few, in terms of enemies, there are definitely a fair share of enemies where we had the governor being one of them. We had Beta, also as well Alpha, one of the interesting ones, definitely for sure at that point. Um, haven't been able to not really change things, but her daughter actually ended up changing sides and everything, and that really wanted to be a part of the group and everything, and things getting really creative, and that side basically more on the side of the dead and actually acting like them and having to adapt that way, and that actually helps them out in a lot of ways. So that was interesting to see, and that because it actually showed like if the walkers, how would they react until they change things, and how it'd be like if they talked, but it was actually Alpha and their group and everything. So that was pretty interesting to see how that turned about and everything. But they basically got so far on that and thought they could try and take over, but they didn't. And also Negan basically in the way helping out on that, especially with his fair share of problems, which I'll get into because Negan is one of the other villains, mainly the main one, and everything, and being able to deal with Wrecking being basically a problem for a long time, especially getting into where they ended up basically killing off quite a bit of people, including Abraham and Glenn, one of them being the main ones basically on that. It definitely was upsetting for sure, and didn't expect that to happen, didn't want that to happen, but definitely dead sick, and that was basically one of the worst deaths for sure. I seen Glenn die, especially with everyone else for the most part, for some of the group anyway. So that basically had Maggie left alone and eventually having the baby and being able to deal with single motherhood and everything, and having to take care of the baby on their own. Another one of the more tragic deaths too, besides Glenn, was Herschel, unfortunately, and being able to help things out, especially with one of the many wars that they did have too, and being unfortunately able to die on that. So Maggie basically being able to deal with a lot on that. So basically, trying to have herself being more stronger over time and everything, and eventually breaking out on her own, going into one of the locations that they did eventually end up finding, which was Hilltop. So um, it was definitely basically like one of their escapes and one of their safe houses to towns as well that they had there, so close to Alexandria, another safe place that they did have besides the jail and everything. So that was mainly one of the places that they stayed basically the longest to and help out other people, bring them in and everything. So there was a lot there. In terms of other enemies, of course, one of them being, of course, Shane, the Reapers, the Terminus group, and Simon on that. So a lot of enemies over time, a lot of wars that they did actually have to go through to be to where they are today, and dealing with somewhat of more of a enemy as of right now, but that's kind of like in question. But in terms of like certain people, so that remains to be seen. I'll probably maybe try and get in touch more bases on that, and then kind of continue things. Maybe talk about more of the final episodes a little bit over time, because there is like basically about maybe two left, which is pretty crazy to actually be able to have that happen as long as the show's been going on. So that's basically it in terms of in a nutshell what's been happening as of late over time. So being able to see that from The Walking Dead to the other shows as they happen has been really cool to see in terms of seeing, in terms with Rick's group, and then eventually having that crossover between The Walking Dead and Fear quite often. So that's been really cool, and then having The Walking Dead World Beyond too on that, and basically having that be on its own thing in a way in terms. So there's still a lot more to be said and talked about, and again, in terms of like going back a little bit, in terms like Negan and Maggie, being able to see how things transpire between the both of them, and she hasn't been able to trust Negan a lot, and Negan eventually going to jail way later on and being able to figure things out, and really think about what he did and actually changed him on that. Judith helped realize that, and eventually over time, Carl being able to see more of the change felt like he could change for Negan and everything before he unfortunately ended up actually dying after a while too as well. So basically ended up being Rick and as well Judith and everything after a while. Also Rick being able to deal with one of the bridges and everything, especially being able to deal with one of the wars and being able to have the bridge actually break up and just be destroyed and everything, and just trying to really save things after that. I believe it's actually a war with the walkers and everything more, so they can actually be saved and everything in terms of that. So it was just a whole mess with that, and everyone thinking he was able to die, but it seems like he was being able to be saved as well. So I feel like we'll get more of that in the movies. One of the movies I know, looking at being more so on Rick's side and everything. I'm sure Daryl and Carol will probably be there too, especially Michonne, because she was able to be in the relationship after a while with Rick and everything, being able to try and find him. So basically, Judith was left with Daryl and everyone else, and they were able to help take care of her. So that was just a lot to be able to deal with, especially up until where we are right now. So I'm curious to see how we'll find Rick again, whether or not he'll be in the final two episodes. I'm not really too sure on that comeback, or we'll just see him in what it's looking to be with the movies that I've been hearing about. So we'll see what happens with that, and it definitely should be interesting. But I have been, again, a huge fan of The Walking Dead ever since the beginning. Been watching it ever since and everything. And even though it was upsetting to see the deaths, I still kept on watching anyway because I wanted to see how things were able to continue. And there were other characters too that I actually enjoyed seeing it, wanted to see them progress, and wanting to see where things would go on that and see them grow. So there's a lot to look forward to on that. I could have been more full in depth in terms of characters and all that, but it would have been a lot more to get through on that. So I just wanted to be here more brief on why I like it and everything, how I got into it, and let's just discuss things, a little briefly, and talk about more of the main parts and everything, and then to how we got to where we are now. So it's been a really crazy journey. It's been a mess. A lot has happened, a lot of drama, and a lot of excitement too, as well, going into things. So it definitely has been exciting, and it is gonna suck to see it actually go, at least with the main show. But I know Fear the Walking Dead is actually gonna be returning right after that, and I do like to have a tradition basically on being able to watch the after show is Talking Dead. And I always like that too, to see more of the breakdown and what happened on the episodes, what's looking to be upcoming, how things that came about and everything, all these cool other facts and everything that happened and how the show actually took place, and they have special guests and everything. So it has been really cool seeing that. So I really always enjoyed watching The Walking Dead, and then Talking Dead after that. I saw added a little bit extra more to that. So basically, I'll leave it with this, and those are my thoughts on basically the main part of The Walking Dead episodes and how things transpired and everything else in between. So, what are your thoughts on The Walking Dead as a whole? Uh, what got you into it? Who are your favorite characters? What are your favorite episodes as well? I'd like to hear that. If you're watching on YouTube for the video version, leave a comment as always. Not only that, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell because it actually helps out grow the channel, and I appreciate your support as always. Check out the podcast on my socials, which would be also not only on Twitter, YouTube, and as well, I am on Twitch for the In the Hot Seat podcast as well. We're on TikTok on top of that. So there's a little bit of everywhere as well on Facebook, with the Facebook group to actually get engaged with the In the Hot Seat podcast. But until then, I'll catch you guys whenever the hell the next podcast may be. Until then, I'll catch you again then, and enjoy the rest of your week. See ya and peace.